You're listening to Berserker Boys 1 Bear by Lulu M. Sylvian.
Chapter 1. Don't look now, but these guys behind you think they're Vikings or something, Aaliyah said. Maisie twisted in her seat. Her eyes were wide, and she practically vibrated with excitement when Aaliyah could see Maisie's face again. I thought I told you not to look. Yeardley leaned back in her chair and quickly glanced in the direction Aaliyah had indicated. What the huh? Aaliyah shrugged. Who knows, maybe it's the latest fashion. Aaliyah wasn't bothered by fashion. Having grown up without access to the current trends, she had developed a sense of style free from the influence of fashion magazines or influencers. Her denim jacket was an odd green color, not Kelly green and not olive, but some bastard child in the middle. Her mother had bought it Aaliyah's senior year of high school. She had spent 4 years begging for a denim jacket with visions of looking like a badass in denim. It had taken her months to get over the disappointment she had felt, but in the end she loved the uniqueness of it. Most of her clothes were thrift store finds or modifications, a habit that stuck with her from her youth. Case in point, the light cardigan she wore as a blouse was navy with gold stars she had embroidered on herself. She wore a color block skirt with a designer label, another thrifting score. Anything she didn't understand was always the latest fashion. Are you okay? Aaliyah asked Maisie. Maisie was visibly shaking and looked like she was going to start crying at any second. Her lower lip quivered. Yeardley leaned forward and rested her hand on Maisie's arm. Maisie? Maisie fanned her face. Her hand moved so rapidly it was more of a hand flapping than anything else. That's Scotty, Maisie squeaked out. Aaliyah looked from her friend to the group of men dressed in leathers and furs like post-Iron Age warriors and back. Who is Scotty? She was ready to march over to them, no matter how intimidating they looked, and give this Scotty a piece of her mind if he had wronged Maisie in their mutual past. Yeardley cast her glance to the group and back to Aaliyah. Why is that name familiar? You didn't date him. I'd remember if you had gone out with. Oh my, no. He's on Minvid. I've shown you his video clips. He's really cute. She was talking through clenched teeth. Panic written all over her face. Oh, him. That's why he looks so familiar, Yeardley said. I still have no idea which one you're talking about, Aaliyah admitted. Maisie sighed long and deep. The ginger one. He's so cute. She fell forward and face planted against the table. Without Maisie's head in the way, Aaliyah had a clear view of the Viking men. 2 white guys, one with flaming orange hair, the kind that Aaliyah always thought of as nature's warning label, and a black guy with long locks. It was hard to see what Maisie found appealing about the redhead. It was hard to find anything about them appealing. They were all rather ragged-looking, with varying colors of makeup smeared across their faces. She rolled her eyes and looked away when the other white guy winked at her. He did have pretty blue eyes, though. Yeardley was patting Maisie on the back. Why don't you just get up and go say hi? Maisie bolted upright, her twin long braids swinging. Oh my, I couldn't. What if he? She pressed her hands to her face, covering her eyes. After a moment, she uncovered her eyes and waved her hands down her front, blowing air out of pursed lips. They're probably in town for a con or something. I don't know what's around. But yeah. Maisie, you are avoiding getting up and going over there and saying hi, Yeardley chastised. What's the worst that could happen? You'll say hi, I like your videos, he'll say thanks. And that's it. That's not the worst thing that could happen. And I just don't want to have to deal with that, ever again. I know exactly what you're talking about, and Maisie, that guy was a jerk with a capital J. No self-respecting, sober artist is going to be that disgustingly rude. No, they'll just lie to me, and the entire time, I'm only going to be thinking about what they aren't saying. He was drunk. He just didn't have his filters in place, so I got his truth, Maisie said. Her excitement that Scotty was at the table behind her visibly melted away. She frowned. Just because Dave Baca, a known drunk and jerk, said those things doesn't make them true, Yeardley said. Maisie stared down at her hands, her fingers twisted together in a show of nerves. Who is Dave Baca? Aaliyah asked. Dave Baca used to be a voice actor. He did some big sci-fi animes. I met him at a meet and greet for fans and he said some crappy things to me about cosplaying characters I shouldn't because I was fat, Maisie confessed. He also got hit by cancel culture hard because he was a drunk and kept hitting on teenagers that were part of the show's fandom. It's why she hasn't been back to a con in a while. She used to go do all that cosplay stuff, Yeardley said. What a complete jerk, Aaliyah commented. We should all go sometime, Yeardley suggested. Aaliyah, have you ever been? You'd love it. They have these things called artist alleys. Local artists display and sell their work. You can meet comic book artists, people who do fan art like you do. I doubt it's the same kind of fan art, Aaliyah said dismissively. No, we should. Maisie could get back on her cosplay bike, it would be fun. Besides, the guys there can be really hot. Or super jerks, Maisie added. I doubt this Scotty guy is going to be anything like that. He's not super famous, so maybe he doesn't have an ego? Aaliyah asked. He has over 1 million followers. Oh no, I can't. Maisie blushed. Aaliyah pushed up to her feet. You are going to meet him. I'm going to go over there and ask him to come say hi. I will screen his little attitude, and if I think he's gonna be a jerk, I'll save you from having your Minvid crush disappoint you. Aaliyah, you can't. But she was already crossing the patio to stand in front of the Vikings table. Apparently your name is Scotty, she said to the redhead. Up close he was kind of cute. He had high cheekbones and a strong rounded chin. His hair was cut in a shaggy mullet, and the orange strands curled a bit on the ends. His dark blue eyes were rimmed in copious amounts of black liner. Yeah, that's me. What did I do? He smirked. Oh yeah, Aaliyah could see exactly why Maisie thought he was cute. He was totally her type. The man he sat next to reached out and backhanded him on the shoulder. Aaliyah didn't want to stare, but it appeared that he had claws. It must be part of the costume. What's your name? The other white guy asked. He pointed to his friends, Scotty, Wolf, his finger landed on his chest. Vic? Aaliyah was temporarily stunned into silence. Vic's eyes seemed to pin her in place. They were simultaneously beautiful and eerie, a piercing vivid clear blue. They didn't look real. She swallowed. I'm Aaliyah. My friend over there, she pointed over her shoulder and then froze as she stared at Vic's scalp. His dirty blonde hair was shaved into a wide mohawk. Messy braids and strands, decorated with gold beads, were twisted into a larger messy braid that followed the contour of his head before splaying out into hair that needed to be combed. Tattooed on his scalp, along the shaved edge, were a series of symbols. Her vision turned red. She twisted her pointed finger to Wolf, the black man sitting between the two white guys. What the hell are you doing with someone like him? She practically yelled as she pointed an accusatory finger in Vic's direction. And to think she had thought that he was hot for a split second. Wolf's hands went up, and Scotty leaned forward aggressively. Wolf clamped a hand with, yep, he had claws, long fingernails over Scotty's arm. What do you mean, with someone like him? You're black, and he's a white supremacist. Aaliyah's eyes blazed with the fury of a goddess of wrath. Vic shook his head. He couldn't have her thinking the wrong thing. My lady, I assure you I am not a white supremacist or anything of the like. You have hate symbols tattooed on your head, so I'm not convinced. She turned her attention back to Wolf, and then to Scotty. You should be ashamed. I can't believe Maisie was nervous about meeting you, thinking you were going to end up some kind of jerk. She's going to be crushed. Aaliyah, it's not what you think. Wolf held up an amulet from around his neck. It was his Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, worn around his neck the way a Catholic might wear a cross. We're pagans. Norse Heathen specifically, and these are the symbols of our gods. And we claim them back from hate groups. Please let me explain. Vic moved a chair out from the table for Aaliyah and gestured for her to take a seat. We don't do Nazis here, Scotty said, holding up his messenger bag. It was covered in patches. He pointed to a stylized Mjolnir design with the words, "No Nazis in Valhalla." Vic had a similar sticker on his laptop. I can't believe I'm doing this. You don't deserve my time. She sat hard and crossed her arms. Vic stood. Before he towered over her, he dropped to his knees in front of her. I am a follower of Odin the All-Father. By All-Father, we do mean all. Odin doesn't discriminate, Wolf added. Vic ran his fingers over the markings. These runes represent a prayer of protection. Calling on the god tier for protection and strength in battle, take me to Valhalla should I die, Tawaz, Othala Ansir. He pointed to the first one shaped like an arrow. This is a symbol of victory and making the right choices. It represents the god of battle directly. Now this one, he pointed to the one shaped like a squared-off ribbon loop. If you ever see it with feet, that's a bastardization used by hate groups. I will never use that version of the rune. Othala is home. And this one breathes life into the previous two. He pointed to the rune shaped like a stylized F, basically means make it so. It gives these a power boost. If those marks are being used by neo-Nazis, why do you keep using them? Why tattoo them on your body? Because we will not let those bastards win and poison the symbols of our gods, Vic said with conviction. They kept me protected when I was younger and stupid. They protect me now. I am sorry my markings have caused you distress. He wrapped his hands around hers and lowered his head until his forehead touched her hands clasped in her lap. And I thought you were just dressing up for fun. Aaliyah sounded confused, but she stayed. We are dressed up for fun, Scotty said. Vic felt an uncomfortable pang when he realized Aaliyah was looking at Wolf. Vikings though? Her brow scrunched up with her question. She pointed at Scotty, and then back to Vic. They make sense, they're white? Wolf asked. Viking is a job description, not a cultural designation. They recruited from other places. Vikings traveled as far as China and into the Middle East. There are runestones at the Black Sea. Vikings were more interested in your ability to fight, if you were clean, and if you looked good. Besides, it's fun. What the hell is going on over here? Vic looked past the beautiful Aaliyah as a tall blonde shield maiden stormed over. Oh hi. Her tone and demeanor changed dramatically when she looked at Wolf. He had that effect on women. Someone had once said it was his puppy dog eyes. Vic had no idea what they meant. It didn't matter, it took the wind right out of her indignant sails. This is Vic, Aaliyah said as she took one of her hands away from his. He noticed she continued to let him hold her hand. And that's Wolf and Scotty. Okay, you can't abandon me over there all by myself. Hi Scotty, their third friend said. All he could see of her earlier were her long dark braids. She was cute and round, and blushed furiously as she waved awkwardly at Scotty. I follow you on Minvid. What are you guys all dressed up for? She bit her lip and shrugged. Have you ladies ordered yet? Vic asked. Aaliyah shook her head. I haven't even looked at the menu. Why don't you join us? We can drag another table over. Scotty was on his feet and wrangling an additional table. The waiter came out and helped Scotty move chairs, and then helped to carry menus over to the now larger table. I see that you are all dressed normally. What are you up to today? Scotty asked. Maisie melted into a blushing fit of giggles. Nothing, just hanging out. Getting lunch. I think that's supposed to be what one of us asks you, Yeardley said. And don't say nothing, 'cause fur and chain mail isn't nothing. Apparently they are on some kind of Viking education outreach mission, Aaliyah said. Oh yeah? Yeardley asked. Okay, hit me with everything I ever wanted to know about Vikings but was afraid to ask. I'm more interested in why you guys are all dressed up. Are you doing a photo shoot or something? Maisie asked without stammering. Vikings knew about the American continent, had settlements, and probably harvested wood for their ships hundreds of years before Christopher Columbus sailed, Wolf answered Yeardley directly. Please, Maisie cut in. Lots of people knew about the Americas before Columbus and his lot. It's almost as if the Spanish and Italians were the only ones who didn't know about the Americas. There's plenty of evidence supporting that Asians had landed on the West Coast, and even African traders interacted with South America. Vikings were raging feminists. Wolf crossed his arms with a smug expression. Excuse me, assaulting and pillaging and invading lands to take their women? Aaliyah commented. Vic sighed. We're really going to have to work on what you know about Vikings, aren't we? He smirked at Aaliyah, and she smiled back. The idea of working with Vic on anything was kind of thrilling. She wanted to know more about this man who hadn't gotten angry, only sad when she misjudged him, and then he calmly explained while she all but screamed in his face. She lifted her hand palm up, giving him the floor as it were. Remember, Viking is a job description, but in the Norse societies these men lived in, the women had rights. They worked the settlements. They tended the safety of their villages when the men were away. Women had their own money. They were allowed to divorce. They were allowed to train and fight. So you're saying that Vikings liked strong women? Yeardley asked. Her eyes hadn't drifted from Wolf since they sat down. Absolutely, Wolf drawled. So how do you know all of this? Aaliyah asked. Reading online research. It came to me as a spin-off of my following Odin, Vic answered. I wanted to know more about Vikings if I was going to cosplay one. I figured I should know more about them than what gets put in video games, Wolf said. Yeah, what they said, Scotty answered. So, you read a Wikipedia page? Maisie asked. Aaliyah was impressed. Her friend had gone from blushing fangirl to snarky with no more cares to give. You are a feisty one, aren't you? Scotty smirked. Can we take a selfie? Maisie blurted out. Okay, maybe she still had plenty of cares to give. Sure, Scotty said. Maisie handed him her phone. You have longer arms. Scotty reached out and Maisie leaned in, making cross-finger hearts, K-pop style. They held still and smiled at her phone. Oh, we should take a group picture, Maisie cooed. Aaliyah felt a shiver run down her spine when Vic placed his arm over her shoulder and leaned in close as Maisie posed in front to take a group selfie. Can I help you with that? The waiter showed up in time to help out. Vic kept his arm over the back of her chair, even after the waiter handed Maisie her phone back. The point is, if someone is dressing up like a Viking, claiming any kind of connection to them, they should know their history and the mythos surrounding the Norse deities, Vic said. So you're saying there is more to Thor than long blonde hair and a flying hammer? Maisie asked. Yes, and Loki was supposed to be a redhead when he wasn't a horse, Scotty said. There is a story there, but, no, I can't wait. What? Aaliyah asked. Vic laughed. The Loki and Thor stories are great. They did a lot of crazy things. A lot of the gods did. And yes, Loki turned into a female horse to cause a bit of a distraction. Okay, why did you emphasize female horse? Isn't a horse a horse? Yeardley asked. Yes, well, only female horses can have babies, Wolf answered. Aaliyah closed her eyes for a long moment to process the conversation around her. Of course, female horses are the ones that had babies. Why the hell did that matter? Wait, are you saying Loki had a horse baby? Yeah, Vic said. Loki is a mother. There's a lot of stuff like that in Norse mythology. That's why it's important to know what you're getting into if you want to represent Vikings or even get into the religion. It sounds like a lot, Aaliyah said. It is a lot. But it's cool stuff. Okay, so Viking Lessons 101 aside, why are you guys walking around all decked out? Unless it's the newest trend, what gives? Aaliyah asked. Vic's handsome face narrowed into a glare that he directed at Scotty. Aaliyah noticed that Wolf had also cut a glare in Scotty's direction. Okay. How long are you going to hold it against me? Scotty held up his hands and leaned away from the onslaught of glares. Oh, hold what? Maisie perked right up. We were attending a LARP, Vic started. A what? Aaliyah asked. Are you familiar with gaming? D&D? Roleplay, tabletop games, video games? All of that? Wolf asked. Aaliyah smiled. Yes, I know about gaming. Oh, I don't live in a cave. I'm just not big into geek culture or Vikings. She quickly turned to Vic. But I'm willing to learn. LARP, live-action roleplay. It's a lot like playing any role-playing game, where you roll the dice to determine the outcome of any given scenario. But you dress up and get into it a bit more, Vic explained. So you are all headed out to play games dressed up like Vikings? Exactly, Scotty answered with a huge grin on his face. It's so much fun. We're going to battle. Aaliyah looked at Vic, hoping he would provide a more in-depth answer. There is an all-day regional LARP battle. People come from all over, dressed up in their favorite cosplay and we beat the crap out of each other with foam and duct tape swords. Scotty finished. Foam and duct tape? Aaliyah asked. Vic shrugged. No one wants to get hurt, they want to have fun. There will be people there dressed up from their favorite video games, and they'll have crazy, unrealistic weapons. And then there will be others like us, Wolf started. With safe, harmless mock-ups of real weapons. Like what? Oh, can you show me? Maisie asked enthusiastically. Why don't you come with us after lunch? You can check out what it's all about, Wolf offered. If it's all day, why are you here? Yeardley asked. Scotty let out a long, dejected sigh. I left the cooler with all of our food in the driveway at my house. I forgot to put it in the car, and I was in charge of food. So I'm buying the guys lunch. Chapter 2. That's their car, hurry up or we're going to lose them again, Maisie squealed. Ever since she got in the car after having met Scotty, she was bouncing off the walls. This would be easier if that Scotty guy didn't drive like a maniac, Yeardley grumbled. She was doing a pretty good job of keeping up, but it certainly felt like they were in some kind of a car chase, weaving in and out of traffic. Aaliyah braced herself with one hand pressed up into the ceiling and another on the window, just to keep from being thrown all over the back seat. Maisie's manic panic over losing the guys was not helping her fraying nerves. She had made a complete ass of herself in front of Vic, calling him a white supremacist. Talk about jumping to conclusions, but she ran with the information she had. Even he admitted it was confusing. But she understood why they were holding onto their symbols fiercely. People had to take a stand where they could, and if that meant not giving away what was theirs while the real jerks tried to use them, well, she understood why Vic and his friends were digging in their heels and holding tight. How far away is this LARP thing? She asked. Not that she was prone to car sickness, but the ride was getting to be a lot too much. Scotty said it wasn't far, Maisie answered. Yeah, he also didn't say where it was. Follow us. Yeardley mocked Scotty's battle call when she asked for an address to put in her GPS. Oh look, a sign. World LARP this way, Maisie said. The car noticeably slowed and stopped weaving about. Aaliyah sighed. You okay back there? You aren't going to be sick, are you? Yeardley asked. We're going to lose them, Maisie panicked. Watch for more of those world LARP signs. They should get us there. If Scotty loses us, it's on him. Aaliyah is about to puke. She's turning green. Oh, like an orc? Maisie turned around to look at Aaliyah from the front seat. Ah, you look fine. You're not going to puke, are you? If I do puke, I'm saving it so I can hurl on Scotty's shoes. Maisie turned and huffed back into her seat. What do you have against Scotty? He drives like a maniac, that's what. He's driving like he wants to lose us. You're just mad you didn't get Wolf's number. Well, you didn't get Scotty's, Yeardley snapped back. No, Maisie pouted. But I did get a selfie. Aaliyah closed her eyes and focused on breathing and not puking the rest of the ride. Turn right up ahead, Maisie announced. The car bounced on uneven ground. When Aaliyah opened her eyes, they were following a line of cars and being directed to park in a field. Just beyond the cars were a row of tents with flags of different colors and symbols. Okay, kids, we're here. Remember to hold hands with your partner and don't wander away from the group, Yeardley said with the perfect inflection of someone who had been a camp counselor and taken plenty of kids on field trips. This is so exciting, Maisie practically jumped up and down as soon as she was out of the car. Aaliyah rolled out of the back seat and felt like kissing the ground. Everything was blessedly still. Let's go find the guys. Aaliyah wished Maisie's enthusiasm was infectious. After that ride, she wasn't feeling particularly eager to check out this event. Yeardley put her arm around Aaliyah's shoulder. You were looking pretty peaked there. You up for this? I'm out of the car, and the fresh air is helping. Besides, I really kind of want to see them in action. You mean Vic? Yeardley chuckled. Aaliyah pointed from herself to Yeardley to Maisie. Vic Wolf Scotty, I mean, yeah, totally. He's hot, I'm not gonna lie. I know, right? There they are. Maisie squealed again. Aaliyah really wanted to give her friend a little chill gummy. She had never seen this level of enthusiasm from Maisie before. It was taking a modicum of acclamation. Aaliyah followed Maisie's gesture. The guys were there all right, but they looked like they were about to fight. Vic was squaring up to Scotty, and Wolf stood glowering with his arms crossed. Damn, they were all freaking tall. Scotty was wiry in comparison, so he didn't appear as big, but he was just as tall as Vic. It was hard to gauge with Wolf, seeing how he wasn't right up in the middle of the two of them. Scotty. Maisie called as she quickened her step. Vic shoved Scotty and strode in their direction. Aaliyah didn't want to smile. He looked like a fierce warrior coming toward her. Like some scene out of a movie, only better. When he made eye contact with her, he visibly relaxed and his step quickened. I thought that jerk lost you. Are you okay? He said as soon as he reached her and Yeardley. He's lucky I grew up on Speed Racer and the Fast and the Furious franchise. I could probably take him on pole position any day, Yeardley said with a grunt. It's a video game. She shook her head and continued walking. I got a little car sick. Yeardley may be able to drive like that, but her car is not made for it. I am definitely not made for it. But we made it. You did. His smile made Aaliyah feel a little weak in the knees. They walked slowly back to the car where Scotty and Wolf were pulling swords and battle axes and more furs from the car. If Aaliyah had thought the guys had looked like Vikings before, she had clearly been mistaken. Wolf adjusted a large fur across his shoulders. His long locks blended in, and he looked as if he were wearing even more fur. Scotty hefted two large broadsword replicas. The way he twirled them around made Aaliyah think they had to be pretty light. After all, hadn't one of them said something about the swords being all foam and duct tape? You fight in all of this? Aaliyah asked, as she fingered a fur Vic draped over his shoulders. It was rough, not soft like she expected. When he turned, she noticed it had a bare head hanging down, like some kind of extreme hood. She pulled her hand away, before slowly reaching back out to touch the fur. A bear head? Is this real? Vic rubbed the fur at his shoulder, and twisted as if he could see the head that hung down behind him. A bear is my symbolic animal. Why are you smiling? Aaliyah bit her lip. You didn't use a culturally appropriative term. Like, you didn't even have to think about it. And I was such a jerk earlier. And I'm a dork. Vic leaned in close. You make a cute dork. Since I think it would matter to you, Bjorn here was ethically sourced. It has a name? He has a name. He gives me his spirit in battle. He deserves a name, Vic said with all seriousness. Bjorn is a good name. You get into these things, don't you? It's better than tagging freight trains. Keeps me out of trouble and from getting bored. How do you find out about these things? She asked as they crossed the field-turned parking lot and headed toward the tents. Once you get into it, it's kind of hard not to know about them. You join one listserv, one social media group, and the next thing you know you're following LARPs and cons on every freaking platform. And joining others just to stay in the loop. I get it, it's like listening to K-pop. You follow one band and go in search of the fans, and then you're following all the bands, and all of your friends seem to be into it. Is that how you all know each other? Isn't it obvious? Aaliyah laughed. That's exactly what happened. I met Yeardley online, and she already knew Maisie from college. And we all met up with some others at a concert last year. It was so much fun. And now fandoms collide, Vic said. They had reached the tents, slightly behind the rest of their group. Are you fighting? You need to check in. Aaliyah couldn't decide if the girl directing them where to go was dressed up, or if she just had an extreme sense of style, with platform boots and a PVC vinyl mini skirt. Oh, I'm just here to observe, Aaliyah stammered. Okay, you get one of these. The girl wrapped a red Tyvek wristband around Aaliyah's wrist. Remember to stay behind the white chalked line on the field for your safety. I'm fighting, Vic said. You need to check in at the booth with the blue Federation flags. She pointed along the row of tents. Aaliyah felt as if she had been plunged from reality into a sci-fi movie's version of the outdoor bazaar crossed with a Ren fair. There were characters from different movies that she recognized, and general characters from fantasy that she could identify but didn't know if they were from a game or what. A wizard tended to look like a wizard, and orcs had a definite look about them from a variety of sources. But there were so many more characters. She saw pirates, both the Scourge of the Spanish Main and the Space kind. There were skinny kids in long black coats walking around with swords that looked like giant blades from wind turbines. She gasped when she saw people dressed up in the long flowing robes of her favorite genre of Chinese magic martial arts costume dramas. Did you see the guys dressed up like Lan Shao and Lan Ying? It was Aaliyah's turn to gush. Who? Yeardley asked. Wait, those are the hot guys in that Masters of Discipline show from China, right? Maisie asked. Yeah, and they did a beautiful job on their costumes. Those guys are so hot, Maisie said. She made an expression like her face was melting from their hotness. Vic watched as Aaliyah and her friends walked away in the opposite direction. Maybe this had been a bad idea, but he had wanted her to see what he and the symbols on his scalp meant. He had almost given away too much when she started asking about the bear on his back. I get it, you're a jerk, but do you have to act like one all the time? Wolf growled at Scotty. They shuffled back and forth, waiting to fill out the waivers, so they could go out on the field and wail away on anyone and everyone. It was a video game battle raid brought to life. And that was one of the main reasons they were there. Things were coming to these events that shouldn't be. You're lucky Yeardley isn't afraid to drive like a drag racer, Wolf continued. Yeah man, Vic started. Aaliyah got car sick. Are you two going to be up my butt about that all day? So I drove a little fast. Your girls caught up no problem, Scotty complained. What's your problem, man? Vic asked. Scotty had something up his butt all right. He had just better chill out before it was Vic's boot. Nothing, Scotty huffed. Why did you suggest they come? I thought you liked fangirls. I do, but she's a bit too much fangirl if you know what I mean. Scotty shrugged and wiggled his eyebrows. Jesus, Scotty, do you have to be such a pig? Wolf snarled. But I am, Scotty exclaimed. That's no excuse to act like one. And no, I don't know what you mean. That Maisie chick is cute. Explain yourself, Vic said as he readjusted the battle axes he wore on his belt. So what if Maisie was a big girl? So was Aaliyah. Hell, all three of the women they had met were not dainty little things. Scotty's tastes tended toward the barbarian Viking fantasy chicks, who went for the fur bikini aesthetic but didn't look like they could lift an axe. Vic admired a good Frazetta barbarian babe himself, but that didn't preclude him from admiring or being attracted to different body types. That Yeardley chick, now she could probably carry that barbarian look off. Maybe that was Scotty's problem. Yeardley only saw Wolf and wasn't fawning appropriately over Scotty. It was still no excuse to be a jerk to his friends or rude about Maisie. Scotty closed his eyes and sighed. Why does it matter? You're getting what you want. Hot girl, socially oriented. I mean, did you get all hot and bothered when she started yelling and you were gonna have a chance to show off, or after when it was clear she accepted your apology and explanation and was into you again? Vic started to laugh. It was sarcastic and bitter. Stay away from me out there. Something has crawled up your butt and is riding you hard. And I don't think I care for your company right now. Also screw you. Vic stepped out of line and let a pair of cosplaying fighters from the popular anime Swordcraft streaming take his spot in line. Scotty was his friend, and if he throat-punched the guy before they filled out any waivers, or ran into Scotty out on that field today, they might not be friends much longer. Yes, he had found Aaliyah attractive when she went into protective warrior mode when she thought Wolf was hanging out with fascists. It meant they saw things in parallel. It meant he knew a lot about her from a few moments of righteous indignation. For him, it was just a preview of everything about her he wanted to know. He knew she was adorably attractive. Her hair looked soft like a dark cloud. Her smile illuminated her entire face. And those glasses were straight out of the gorgeous smart girl playbook. She looked like she would be soft and feel good in his arms, and be a responsible recycler. He stewed in his anger as he walked back to the end of the line. Scotty could be a jerk, but he typically wasn't this much of an ass. Maybe inviting Aaliyah to come see the LARP battle wasn't the best idea. But it hadn't scared her off. How many times had he gotten a cute girl to act interested, only to run away when he suggested they do something remotely geeky, or obviously pagan? So far Aaliyah hadn't seemed discouraged by either. There was a nagging at the back of his brain. What if this was all a bad idea? The LARP seemed innocuous enough. So far no one tripped any red flags for him. And neither Wolf nor Scotty mentioned having encountered any energy surges. They walked the field before lunch and participated in an earlier battle. Everything had stayed normal. Facsimile weapons stayed fake. The only characters from magical realms were people in costume and makeup. They could participate for fun. Maybe that lack of anything bad happening lulled him into a false sense that nothing bad would continue to be the standard for the afternoon's battles. A shiver rolled down his spine, a sensation that was unfamiliar. He didn't like it. You okay? Wolf asked. Yeah, I just need to cool off. Something got me on edge. I feel ya. I don't like it. There are enough gamers here with mobile setups, something could be brewing, he said. Was inviting Aaliyah here the wrong thing to do? Did I put those women in danger? Vic asked. Wolf clapped him on the shoulder. The fact that you are even asking me that tells me two things. The first is that you really like this girl, even though you just met her. And two, you think this morning's battle was too easy. Hey man. Scotty rubbed the back of his neck and looked sheepish. When I said Maisie was too much, I meant her enthusiasm, not her shape. Fill out the forms, I'll be over there. He nodded, indicating he would be in the same direction as the women. If Vic hadn't stepped out of line, he could be hanging with Aaliyah right now, and not waiting behind a winged demon from Edgeland who smelled as if they had not learned the importance of airing out one's cosplay between events. Aaliyah was startled and jumped when an air horn blared. Her heart raced, and she had to catch her breath. Clear the field. That was the first warning. All players must clear the field. What's that all about? Yeardley asked. Aaliyah shrugged. They want everyone off the field so they can confirm wristbands before the battle starts. Wolf seemed to sneak up on them, and was answering before she even realized he was there. The band on his wrist was bright neon green. Oh, that's bright, Aaliyah said. I like it, it's fun. It's more fun than ours, Maisie said, pointing to her red wristband. It's so that it's visible from a distance. They don't want anyone on the field who hasn't signed a waiver. It made perfect sense to Aaliyah. The field was designated by a series of barriers that started a good 20 yards away from the tents. The first barrier was a chalk line in the dirt. The next was a makeshift fence of sorts, using orange safety cones with strings of plastic pennant flags between them. Only the side of the field closest to the tents was roped off. Aaliyah assumed the rest of the field on the other side was fair game. This is so cool, Maisie said with her typical enthusiasm. The costumes and battle gear are insane. I haven't seen this much cosplay in one place since I went to a con. You say that like you haven't been to one in a while, Wolf said. I haven't. Why not? Scotty asked as he joined their little group. Maisie looked him dead in the eye, all of her exuberance gone. I had a bad experience with a minor celebrity. It kind of put me off. You need to come with us. We'll make sure you have a good time, and if anyone bothers you, I'll gut them for you. Maisie looked like she was going to explode, as a fierce blush grew on her cheeks. That sounds like fun. I miss the vendors' rooms. So much cool stuff, Maisie sighed. Vendor rooms are great. I'm partial to the panels, Wolf said. Those can be fun. You mean a panel discussion? Aaliyah asked. What kind of panels do they have? Sometimes TV shows will send promotion tours out, and you'll get actors from something popular, Maisie started. Or something old. The old sci-fi show actors are always making the rounds at smaller cons, Scotty added. They have panels on anything, costuming, 3D modeling, gaming, programming, Wolf said. Programming? Yeardley asked. You mean coding? Yeah, especially coding for games. Those are big. People want to know how to get into the business, or how long it takes to do a build. The testing process, what kind of influence we have on game design, Wolf said. We? You? Yeardley asked. Wolf chuckled. Yeah, I'm a programmer for Edgeland. So I tend to be on a lot of panels. Really? Yeardley seemed to lean in closer. I do programming too, but not for games. I do logistics software. I'd like to see one of your panels. There is a con in a few weeks. Oh, we should go, Maisie said. Where are you going? Vic asked, as he slid into the space next to Aaliyah. There is a convention coming up. It looks like we're all gonna go and meet up there. Vic smiled, and Aaliyah felt it like butterflies in her midsection. Okay, so Wolf and Yeardley are both programmers. I work retail. What do you do? Maisie asked Vic. I'm a Viking, he answered. I mean, what do you do to pay the bills? I sell my services to the highest bidder, Vic smirked. Aaliyah squinted at him. He was either claiming to be an escort or a mercenary. Vic looked at her and gave her another knee-weakening smile. I'm a contractor for game testing. I worked on Edgeland for a bit, and now I'm with Planet Games. I've heard of Edgeland. I mean, it's big, and I actually don't live under a rock, but Planet Games? Aaliyah asked. They make games for phones. So what do you do? I'm an admin, Aaliyah said. She's an artist, Maisie added. She does these amazing watercolors. I'd like to see them sometime, Vic said. Aaliyah smiled. She wanted to show him, and she didn't typically want others to see her work. Another air horn blared. Final call to clear field, final call to clear field. That thing is loud, Aaliyah said after wincing at the noise. It's got to be loud enough to be heard in the midst of battle. It works? So Scotty, what do you do? Are you in video games as well? Aaliyah asked, distracting herself from overtly flirting with Vic. I make min-vids. Right, but for work, Yeardley pointed out. I make min-vids. You can make money doing that? Yeardley asked. With enough followers, you end up getting added to the creator fund, and based on views and followers, yeah. I get paid to make min-vids. Oh crap, Maisie exclaimed. What? Maisie sighed. I have to go. I totally forgot I'm babysitting my nephews tonight. She looked at Yeardley. I'm sorry. Oh, I was looking forward to this, Aaliyah said mournfully. You don't have to go too, do you? Vic asked. I drove, Yeardley said. If I'm leaving. She shrugged in defeat. I can give you a ride home, Vic volunteered. But didn't you ride with Scotty? Is there even room in the car with all the weapons and costumes and stuff? That was just for lunch. My car is out there in the parking lot. Oh, are you sure? Aaliyah asked. Vic nodded. She looked over at her friends. I think I'll stay. You'll be okay? Yeardley asked. Yeah, I can text you a blow-by-blow recount of what's happening. The horrendous air horn sounded again. The field will open in 5 minutes. Battle starts in 15. All players must be on the field. Sounds like that's our call, ladies. Wolf gave everyone a regal bow and turned to leave. DM me, Scotty told Maisie, pointing back and forth between them. We'll work out deets for the con. Maisie nodded her head in tight little movements. She had to be too stunned to reply. You sure you'll be fine? Yeardley asked. I'll take good care of her, Vic said as he slid an arm around Aaliyah's shoulders and started walking toward the battlefield. Chapter 3. I'm glad you decided to stay, Vic said. Aaliyah shook her head. I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I promise it will be worth your while. They walked to an area near a stand of trees. The field was in front, the tents and parking lot behind. A fallen tree had been cut into stumps and logs so that observers had a place to sit. It wasn't exactly observation stands, but in a way it was. I'll come find you here between battles. How many battles are there going to be? Aaliyah asked. They had 2 this morning. We got here late for the second one, so we watched that one. It gave us a chance to check out what kind of fighters are out there. There are 3 scheduled for after lunch. They last about 20 to 40 minutes, with breaks in between. Each new battle starts 15 after the hour. Sounds like someone put a lot of effort into coordinating this, Aaliyah said. Exactly. I wouldn't want to be on the organization committee. It's a lot of work, and it's all volunteer run. They literally couldn't pay me enough to do it. But you come and fight. You enjoy the fruit of their efforts. Heck yeah. I paid my entry fee. You pay to do this? But I got in for free, Aaliyah pointed out. That's because you aren't fighting. If you had to pay to come watch, odds are you wouldn't. But people will pay to get whacked by other people's fake weapons. We're all kind of nuts if I'm honest. She laughed. It was worth every penny of attending this LARP to have met her and hear her laughter. You be here, Vic pointed to the seating area, and I'll be out there. I'll be watching. Aaliyah leaned in and gave him a quick peck on the cheek. For luck? Vic placed a hand over her kiss. He was still rubbing his cheek when he joined the cattle drive through the orange cones and onto the battlefield. There were 3 armies crowded on the field. Vic spotted Wolf and Scotty across the field and strode over to join them. The mass of gathered participants looked more like the starting gate of a costume-themed 5K run, with people stretching and running in place to warm up. So far so good, Scotty announced when he arrived. I thought I got a tickle of something earlier, but I don't know, maybe it was just a random shiver. I haven't felt anything since, Vic added. I strolled over to the gamers area earlier, just to see if I could pick anything up, and I didn't get anything either. There's no signal out here, so the guys were stuck playing what they had downloaded. Tell me again why you would come to a LARP and bring your gaming setup, Scotty asked. So you can game between battles, Wolf answered. So you can meet up with your raiding party in person. So you can participate even if you physically can't participate, Vic added. Don't you have your laptop in the car? You never know what happens if you get sidelined after one battle. It's a gamer's paradise here today, let them have their fun, Wolf smirked. Because I'm about to have mine. He crouched down and held his battle axe high. Scotty twirled his double swords like batons. The air horn sounded. If there was an announcement, no one on the field heard it, because all at once, everyone roared their battle cries, and the 3 army groups rushed together. Vic ran into the horde with his own intimidating scream that sounded more like the roar of an angry bear. He swept his battle axe up, blocking the downward sweep of a claymore from a man wearing a kilt and covered in blue body paint. He spun and got the guy in the solar plexus with a back jab of the axe handle. The blue Scot doubled over, gasping for breath. Vic spun and hooked the ankles of another assailant, bringing them crashing down. He worked swiftly and efficiently, vanquishing his foe at every turn. That was until he came across the type of LARPer he objected to fighting with, Kawaii Battle Princess. She was the main character from a popular game. Its online community of gamers were rabid and vicious, and not all girls. He could go head-to-head with anyone dressed like the small, fluffy little princess with her oversized mallet, as long as they weren't actually the size of the game character. The character was a 5-year-old princess who wore all the fluff and ruffles, with curly blue hair, and a temper that could scare off the grouchiest of silverbacks. Vic froze when he was confronted with a petite fighter dressed in all the pink and blue fluff of the character, who just about topped off at 4 feet tall, wig included. Legally, she had to be over 18 to participate, but she barely looked older than 10. She raised her spiked mallet and swung it on a perfect trajectory to bean him on the top of his head. For pity's sake, he grumbled and fell forward into a roll. The hammer missed his foot by a breath of air. He swung around and scooped her up by the waist. She struggled and screamed like a banshee. He set her down out of his way and kept on moving through the battle. The next opponent, he had no qualms about hitting. The man was dressed like an orc. Built like one too, with shoulders as wide as a pickup truck and arms as thick as tree trunks. He came at Vic with an unholy roar. Vic slid to his knees, his velocity carried him past the orc. He swung his axe into the back of his assailant's knees. The axe stuck against the other guy's boots. Vic wrenched it away, convinced he had just broken his favorite toy. Black ooze dripped from the axe head. That's when he felt the magic slam into him. He watched it roll over the battlefield like a blast of light. Suddenly, the nature of the sounds of the play battle around him changed. The screams took on a terrifying pitch as fake weapons became real ones, and blows that should have only left bruises cut into flesh. "Help, I'm bleeding. Medic." Cries of pain and panic rippled across the battlefield. Vic spun and delivered a killing blow into the orc's back, severing its spine. He saw Scotty arch back, screaming into the sky. Tusks already protruded from his lips. He fell out of Vic's line of sight. He would be fully changed by the time he landed. A blur of fur that was wolf already in his battle form cut past Vic's vision. He followed the direction of the running wolf to see the portal. Sparking flames in blue and gold hues swirled around an opening in the middle of the field. Orcs, tall, muscular, and green, covered in thick spiny armor, ran into the middle of their game. Gray and purple-hooded goblins moved along the ground like creatures who had more limbs than they did and didn't know how to stand upright. They snuck up on their victims by staying low and out of their field of vision. Vic felt the change coming, but he still had time to act. He ran, grabbing the kawaii battle princess and spinning her to face him. "Get out of here, run." "Screw you," she yelled in his face before they were both hit with a splatter of blood from the fighters next to them. She screamed. "Go," he yelled. The change was close. He pulled his bear hood over his head, and suddenly those were now the eyes he saw through. He grew taller, his muscles multiplied. He managed to still grasp his battle axe in one paw, but he didn't need it now, not with the claws that grew from his large paws. "What the heck is happening?" A shout from somewhere behind him. He lumbered at speed to the front line of the invading orcs. Now as tall as the creatures who did not belong in this dimension, he swatted them aside with barely any effort. The orcs were tough. The resilience of the LARP fighters impressed Vic. A band of humans in orc cosplay and over-the-top paladin armor from several games fought back. They formed a line protecting fallen comrades. Goblin screams and falling bodies let him know that Scotty was tearing through the creatures as they hovered closer to the ground. They needed to press the invasion back through the portal and get it shut. Vic tore the limb from an advancing attacker as he continued to rip through his adversaries. He flanked the humans. Together they could put the squeeze on the invasion and press them back. Holy crap, there's a bear. Ignoring the screams that didn't directly impact his actions, Vic charged into the thick of the raiding party. He no longer cared if he got them back on the other side of the portal, as long as they could no longer injure the people on this side of the portal. Aaliyah sat and watched the battle. It looked like the fever dream of a fantasy film, only they didn't have a budget for matching costumes. Also, it wasn't nearly as well choreographed. Everyone had their own fighting style. She eyed the two in the cosplay from Masters of Discipline. She left the seating area to walk along the barrier, following them. They did their very best to fight as if they were in a kung fu movie. They were impressive with their rolling spins. Only without the wires and aerial flips, it wasn't nearly as mesmerizing. But she loved the way their sleeves and robes flowed. She cast her gaze about, not certain if it would be acceptable to take photos. She wanted reference material for her art, and this battle was full of inspiration. She pulled her phone out and began taking pictures. She lost sight of the men in the beautiful robes with the beautiful long black wigs. She saw a group that stood in a small group and hit each other one after the other in their small circle. They seemed to be trying to knock each other over, but not very hard. They spent most of their time laughing. They were having a good time. That's what this was all about, having fun. There were a few fighters out there that seemed to be in it to unleash their aggression. They slammed their homemade weapons with force. A few participants who had enough staggered off the field. She jumped out of the way as an elf in rough spun with pointy ears helped a vinyl-clad character in dark sunglasses limp off to the medic tent. She caught a glimpse of Vic and Wolf. They moved like they had practiced a dance: block, thrust, spin, flip, hit, only to repeat it all over again. They moved through the battle, knocking their opponents to the ground as they moved. If this was a last man standing competition, they were taking out opponents left and right. Scotty wasn't quite as fluid. His approach was more hurling and beating. The three of them together were an army all their own. She took picture after picture. Mesmerized by the way they moved and flowed with the battle, she stopped snapping pictures and let her arms fall. She wanted to experience everything with her own eyes, and not through the tiny lens and screen of her cell phone. Something slammed into her. It wasn't physical, but it certainly felt as if it could have been. Her skin tingled, and she looked around to see if there had been a lightning strike or some kind of power surge. But where would something like that have come from? She tried to shake off the weird feeling that crept up her spine. The battle in front of her was loud, but suddenly it grew louder. And the screams seemed real. She fell back as the smell of blood assaulted her senses. What was happening? She frantically looked for Vic. Surely he would come off the field soon. They had to call an end to the battle if people were getting hurt. Wouldn't they? She caught sight of Vic. Before she could wave and try to get his attention, she watched with disbelieving eyes as he pulled the bear cloak over his head and face. At first, she thought he was wrapping Bjorn around him for protection, but that's not what happened. He pulled the bear on, and he became the bear. A scream froze in her throat as she scrambled away from the edge of the battlefield and landed on her butt. She couldn't seem to get her arms and legs to move, to get her away from the horror she watched as what had started as fun and people in costumes seemed to turn into a real bloody battle with, crap, were those goblins and orcs? Aaliyah was frozen in place as a veritable giant of a man, not a man, an orc, an actual green-skinned, tusked monster from the realms of fantasy and video games, stomped toward her. The ground shook with every booted footfall. She fumbled with her phone and began recording everything. Her brain seemed to fracture, with one part continuing to panic and scream, while the other part was fascinated and studying the details. And the details were amazing. Top to bottom, the creature stalking toward her wore the most interesting armor. Plates of giant scales of heavily textured hide formed the base layer of his protective wear. His chest was mostly exposed, with his arms covered in the scales, and his shoulders, neck, and head with a second layer of articulated armor made from spiny bones. As if he wore the spiked spines and ribs of several small dragons. Dragons? If he was an orc, why wouldn't there be dragons too? All of this was fastened across his chest with a double row of belts and buckles. The muscles of his chest and abdomen looked more like a mountain range. He was so jacked. Around his hips, more belts and buckles. A kilt of plate-sized scales hung to mid-thigh, and his legs were wrapped in more of that articulated bone armor. It made no sense that his vital organs were exposed while his limbs were protected. Then again, he looked exactly like so many video game designs. Aaliyah snapped photos. There were real orcs and goblins crawling around. She wanted to get as much reference material as she could. The two parts of her brain ignored each other and continued doing their thing, one side taking notes on the way the monsters moved and dressed, the other side screaming in abject fear. As both sides realized she was in very real danger, her ability to scream stopped. She forced herself to scramble backward and try to gain her feet. Suddenly, with a roar, a grizzly bear was between her and the orc. He skidded to a stop in front of her. She could barely see over its furry shoulder. The orc paused, smirked, and began laughing. Aaliyah got her feet under her. She backed away, but not too far. The fighting had spilled out of the roped-off area. Goblins that moved more like spiders crawled over everything. Take that, a kawaii battle princess smashed one with her oversized mallet. It lay squished, much like the bug it moved like. Aaliyah placed her hand on the bear's back as it stepped back into her space. A detail she would remember later as her fingers sank into the thick pale brown fur. This fur was soft, unlike the fur on Vic's bare-headed cloak. The fracture in her brain that was half fascinated, half terrified, had merged back into a cohesive unit, and she knew that the bear was safety, protection. She gasped when he reared onto his hind legs. He went up and up and up. No longer able to see the expression on the orc's face, she could only imagine that nasty smirk getting wiped off with a swipe of the bear's claws. She took another step back with the animal in front of her. The bear launched himself at the orc. The green monster raised its massive arm, cudgel in hand. And then it disappeared under the onslaught of angry fur and muscle that was the bear. As the bear and orc did battle, Aaliyah turned to run. There seemed to be a line at the tents none of the monsters could cross. Goblins clawed at an invisible barrier, as if there was a glass wall between them and the humans cowering on the other side. There was a loud rumble, the distinct sound of a modified engine. A tricked-out truck barreled in from the parking lot, past the tents, and bowled into a rush of oncoming orcs. They scattered like bowling pins. The driver spun his truck in a circle, letting the back end take out a cohort of goblins. He was making a good-sized dent in the invading party, until he sped toward the wrong monster. The orc in front of the truck looked like what Aaliyah knew gamers liked to call a boss. This thing was the biggest, ugliest, meanest-looking orc out there. He wasn't green so much as he was a gray-blue color. The spikes and spines of his armor seemed to grow directly from his hide. And he wore a very dramatic cloak over it all. The cloak seemed to ripple and flow on a breeze that wasn't there. He was epic looking. As the truck raced toward him, he stood his ground and raised a fist. His fist came down with enough speed that even Aaliyah could hear it boom through the sound barrier. It slammed into the hood of the truck. The truck folded, its front end bent down as it was forced into the ground. The rear wheels lifted and the truck flipped up and over the boss orc. The air horn sounded. It seemed so out of place in this very real melee of costumed humans and monsters. It may have been set on a timer to announce the end of the battle, but the fighters who were still out there ignored it and continued to attempt to force back the horde of creatures. A second sound filled the air. It sounded like shattering glass. It pierced Aaliyah's ears to the point of pain. She covered her head and fell to her knees. What was that? It needed to stop. If people were screaming from the pain of the sound, Aaliyah couldn't hear any of it. She was vaguely aware of fur surrounding her as she curled up into a ball of pain. Aaliyah wasn't aware of what happened first, Vic's strong arms holding her, or the sound of cut glass stopping. She buried her face against his chest and held on tight as she quaked with nerves. Vic held her and gently rocked her for a few minutes. It wasn't until after she stopped shaking did he ask if she was all right. "Yeah, I'm okay. I think." "Crap, Vic, you're covered in blood." His face was streaked with smears of red and black ooze. It made his blue eyes stand out in startling contrast. His beard was matted with it, as was his hair. "It's not mine." Aaliyah eased away from his body so she could look around. She held her arms loosely around him as his hands rested more on her hips. They both looked at the people and the field surrounding them. There was an upended truck in the middle of the battlefield. People wandered and stumbled around looking dazed and confused. The only orcs around were humans in cosplay. No creepy little goblin things crawled around like humanoid spiders. Vic was a Viking again, and not a grizzly bear. What the heck just happened? "We need to go," Vic said. "I've got your axes," Scotty yelled as he jogged past them. Vic's hand was firm on her upper arm as he guided her out of the area at a run. "Meet you at your place." Vic yelled at Scotty and Wolf as he pulled up next to a hybrid SUV. "Get in," he told Aaliyah. Scotty lifted a fist with a punch to the air and kept running. "Vikings drive hybrids?" Aaliyah teased, unable to articulate what she needed to be asking. Hey, Swedes are leading the way with all-electric vehicles. What did you expect me to drive? Some oil-belching gas guzzler? The car started, and was one of the first vehicles on the road as more and more people abandoned the event en masse. Sirens of emergency vehicles filled the air as cop cars, EMT trucks, and then ambulances sped past. Can you tell me what the hell happened back there? Aaliyah finally asked. Yes, but it is not going to seem real. Look, I have pictures of orcs and what I assume are goblins on my phone. And I know that wasn't some really good cosplay. Neither was Bjorn the bear. What exactly happened? It's happened before, Vic said as he weaved through traffic. Somehow his fast driving didn't make Aaliyah queasy. Maybe because she was in the front seat, maybe because there was the entirety of what the heck was that still occupying her brain. How? Wouldn't something like that make it on the news? Big weird news stories happen all the time. Unless it's a slow news day, they don't typically get picked up by the big news agents. You've seen stories circulating on social media of events gone sideways all the time. I mean, you've heard of the Fire Festival, right? Sure, that big music festival that ended up being a sham more than anything else. Right? You didn't hear about that on the news, you picked that up from social media. Besides, most of those people will not remember what happened. The ones that do, they'll chalk it up to getting carried away in the LARP or a mass drug episode. Someone will start the rumor of mushroom spores since it was outside. And if it was inside, would someone claim a gas leak? Aaliyah asked. Exactly, Vic said. Then why did we run away? It's not exactly running away. First of all, I don't want to be detained, and anyone left on that field when the cops get there, trust me, they are stuck there for a few more hours. Secondly, if you figured out the bear was me, well, I don't need anyone else identifying me like that. Neither do the guys. And lastly, well, Wolf needs to get to a robust system so he can start running down code. Code? What the hell does coding video games have to do with what just happened? Vic pulled his car into a subdivision of McMansions. Aaliyah was glad he knew where he was going. All the houses looked the same to her. He parked in the drive, behind Scotty's familiar sedan. The cooler Scotty mentioned during lunch was still on the driveway. Aaliyah followed Vic in through the front door. There was no living room. It looked like a light studio, and the area where the dining room should be looked like the command deck of a spaceship. A bank of monitors curved around a chair that looked more like a race car with striping and panels of color. Wolf looked out of place in his grimy Viking furs. But his actions were deft and confident. He knew how to drive the ship. Or in this case, video games. One monitor ran lines of code, white text on a black screen. Two other monitors looked like gameplay. Oh hey, that one orc looked almost exactly like this guy, Aaliyah pointed to one of the monitors. Yeah, those orcs were all out of Realms of Strife, specifically the Codex Wars. The giveaway was the way the goblins moved like spiders. That's all part of the updated release, Scotty talked as he hovered over Wolf's shoulder, the game control in his hands. Aaliyah pressed her hands to her face. I'm so confused. What does a video game have to do with what the hell just happened? To the best of our knowledge, it's that someone has figured out how to hack the code, Vic said. Aaliyah watched Wolf as his eyes darted from one monitor to the other. He didn't talk as his fingers flew over the keyboard. Got it, Wolf announced. He banged something out on the keyboard and then fell back into the chair with a sigh. Someone has figured out how to codify magic. They've started hacking into games and opening portals. Aaliyah gasped. Could it have been someone there? I mean, there were a few people with their laptops. Wolf shook his head. I checked them out before the battle began. None of them were hacking code or even playing Codex Wars. It was a meet-up group for Edgeland. I was almost too late to get onto the field. If what you're saying is true, then some computer whiz out there is really a computer wizard? Aaliyah asked. Wolf laughed. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yes, definitely. So are games real? Like there is an alternate dimension that has orcs and stuff? Scotty shrugged. Wolf shook his head. We just don't know, Vic said. How does that explain? She turned to Vic and closed her mouth. He could turn into a bear. Did that mean his friends did too? Did they even know about his ability? Magic, she finally said. How does that explain magic? We don't know. Isn't science just magic explained? Vic raised his brows. It was more than a bit disconcerting to see these three grime-covered men in the middle of clean and mostly empty new construction surrounded by high-tech equipment. I'm still confused, Aaliyah admitted. If someone manages to hack the code of the game on their computer, it's not on their computer. These are social games that run on a remote network. Someone has hacked the main code of what thousands of people are accessing at once, Scotty cut her off. We think that somehow the fact that there are thousands of people accessing this section of code through gameplay, it somehow powers the magic. Giving it the spark to manifest, Wolf continued. If they hacked the system to put the code in, we hack in to pull the code out. Chapter 4. Aaliyah stood poleaxed in the middle of the practically empty room. Everything today seemed positively surreal, all the way down to the fact that the hot blonde guy was completely into her, and she could tell. In typical Aaliyah fashion, if a guy liked her, she usually did something to alienate him completely. Case in point, right now she shouldn't be here, and Vic shouldn't be smiling at her because earlier she accused him of something rather heinous. Well, Vic was not a normal guy. Normal guys didn't know about magic hacking plots that let fantasy monsters into the real world, and they sure didn't turn into bears. She looked around. The walls were bare, and still the original contractor's beige. A blue beanbag was piled in a lump with some lighting equipment on it on the other side of the space. A pyramid of empty Mountain Dew cans lined one wall. It looked like Wolf was in the only chair. Do you have any place I can sit down? She asked. Wolf started laughing. I told you we needed a couch. I'll grab you a chair from the kitchen, Scotty said. He returned a moment later carrying a plastic lawn chair. She hated those chairs. Her aunt had them. They were cheap, stackable, and not friendly to Aaliyah's wider hips. Do you have any furniture? She asked. Scotty shrugged. Do you at least have a proper bed? Or are you sleeping on a mattress on the floor? She called you out, Vic said as he slapped Scotty on the shoulder. Aaliyah sat and looked from man to man to man. Don't you guys ever want to just sit? Wolf chuckled, his focus still on the code in front of him. I'm never here long enough to worry about it. Scotty shrugged. You shoot your videos here, right? Yeah, so? People want to be able to sit. And not in plastic chairs, Aaliyah added as Scotty looked like he was going to say something. She didn't know what bothered her more, the lack of furniture or all the empty wall space. What she would give to have so much hanging space. Vic placed a hand on her shoulder and squeezed. I'm going to head upstairs and grab a quick shower, and then I can give you a ride home. If that's okay. Sure. You live here too? No, Vic shook his head. But I'm gross, and this orc blood is starting to feel itchy. I have a change in the car. Aaliyah nodded as Vic strode from the room. So you live in this big house, all by yourself with no furniture? Not all by himself, Wolf answered. I live here too. And you're okay with not having any furniture? Wolf shrugged. I spend most of my time at the office or out. I have the only chair I need. He patted the armrest of the very serious-looking chair he sat in. You don't have girlfriends, do you? Either of you? She crossed her arms and sat back, laughing. Hey, I feel profiled, Scotty complained. At least I didn't say you were living in your mom's basement, Aaliyah said. Scotty guffawed and pushed on Wolf's chair, jostling him. Shut up, man, Wolf demanded. No, I was joking, Aaliyah said. Why do you think he lives here? Scotty asked. Aaliyah shook her head. I guess you are moving up in the world, out of the basement, and into a really nice house from the look of it. Did you really get the money for this from Minvids? Bought and paid for. Minvids and GameWatch. Damn. What's GameWatch? GameWatch is a specific platform where he plays video games and makes a running commentary as he goes, and other gamers watch. And that makes money? Scotty shrugged and then opened his arms wide, indicating the house they were in. It doesn't make money for everyone. It involves a lot of time, a fairly decent personality, and a dose of luck, Wolf said. Ah, you think I have a personality, Scotty said in a mocking little girl high-pitched voice. Shut up, dude, Wolf grumbled. It wasn't long before Vic came practically skipping down the stairs. He looked like a different man. The missing blood and gore aside, he no longer had dark smears of black and ochre makeup across his eyes. His hair was slicked back into a wet ponytail, and he wore normal clothes. Without the furs, he looked practically civilized. Somehow the mundane clothing emphasized the width of his shoulders. The slate hue of his Henley certainly did a good job of making his eyes pop, and the slim-fit cargo pants made his legs look even longer than before. Aaliyah swallowed a hard lump that formed in her throat. Vic was stunning. There was no way she was reading him right. He couldn't be into her. Men who looked like him, and then she shut herself down. Men who looked like Vic were not automatically misogynistic jerks, simply because they had shoulders and a six-pack. The man drove a hybrid and fought like a bear. Literally. He wasn't hung up on some alpha or beta male label. You ready? He asked. Yeah, Aaliyah managed to finally say. She wasn't sure how long she had just been staring at him, but his face split with a dazzling smile, and she felt her knees go weak. He held his hand out to her. She let him help her from the plastic chair that wanted to stick to her backside. The chair lifted from the ground as she stood, the armrests hooked over her hips. You need real furniture, man, Vic said. So embarrassing, she muttered as she shoved the chair off her backside. No, what's embarrassing is pulling down 6 figures from videos and not having any furniture. At least I don't have that old stuff from my grandmother, Scotty retorted. Aaliyah placed her hand on Vic's arm. This wasn't worth bickering over. It was nice to meet you guys. Hopefully, I'll see you again sometime. Totally, you're coming to a con. It will be fun, Scotty said. Wolf waved, distracted by whatever was on the computer monitors. At some point, Aaliyah thought he had switched over to gaming, but she couldn't be certain. So you have hand-me-down furniture? She asked as she followed Vic out to his vehicle. Yeah, when my grandmother died, my mother insisted that I take the furniture. I wasn't living much differently than Scotty. Plastic lawn furniture, a folding table, mattress on the floor. I think the mentality of rent, lights, and food as priorities is a hard cycle to break. You get used to living with a certain level of comfort, or lack of. Furniture becomes an afterthought. If he ever wants to get a girlfriend, he's going to need to get furniture, Aaliyah said. The kind of women Scotty hooks up with don't care about that. They are more interested in having him as a checkbox than a boyfriend. It's not something that's been an issue for him. Aaliyah sighed. Money was wasted on some people. What she wouldn't give, to be able to buy a house and have it completely paid for before she was 30. She gave Vic directions as he drove. You're taking everything very well, Vic pointed out. No, I'm not. I'm just really good at hiding my anxiety, Aaliyah chuckled. She was a complete mess inside, and she didn't even begin to know where she should focus her energy. On one hand, the hot guy was driving her home, on the other he turned into a freaking bear. And of course, she would never forget facing down an actual orc, only to learn that video games could be conduits for magic. I should be babbling and drooling. But honestly, I'm not sure if any of that was real. Maybe I hit my head, and this is all a delusion. Do you honestly believe that? Vic asked. No, but how else do you explain everything, and don't say magic? Vic shrugged and smirked. Maybe we all live in a video game, and someone is messing with our programming. That's as good as any explanation. I didn't want to say anything back at Scotty's, because I wasn't sure and all, but do the guys know about you being able to shift? Is that why you chose to be a Viking berserker? Aaliyah asked. You don't choose the berserker life, it chooses you, Vic chuckled. Seriously? Aaliyah shook her head and suppressed a laugh. No, but really, what came first, the shifting or the association? Before she knew it, his car was sitting in front of her apartment building. It was an older building that at first glance looked more like a large house than an apartment building with 17 units. Technically, there had only been 16, but at some point, the superintendent's workshop was converted into a basement apartment, and that's what Aaliyah rented. You wouldn't be interested in coming in, would you? Her heart pounded in her throat. Had she just invited Vic inside? I'd love to hear your story. She braced for rejection. Sure, he said as he put the car in park and turned it off. Butterflies rioted in Aaliyah's stomach as she led Vic in through the main entry and down the back stairs. All comments about living in my mother's basement are valid. However, I would like to point out that technically it's my aunt's basement, and I do have furniture. Your aunt owns the building? Her husband, same difference. How else do you think I can afford to live in a building like this? She opened the door and flipped on the lights. The ceilings weren't nearly as high as they were in the original units, and her windows were at ground level, which meant up by the ceiling. But the space was tidy if not eclectically decorated, with a combination of hand-me-downs and refurbished roadside finds. She stood, holding her breath, as Vic looked around. He seemed to be drawn to a painting on the wall. This is really nice. Did you do it? Why do you assume it's mine? She asked tartly. He shook his head and shrugged. You seem very artsy. It's not a print, and he leaned in close and pointed at the lower corner of the artwork. That looks like your name. And that, he turned and pointed at the art table covered in cups of brushes next to a shelf unit of nothing but paints and jars of pigments, is clearly where you work. Busted, Aaliyah chuckled. I bet you did that too, Vic said, pointing to the multi-hued crochet slipcover on the side chair. Aaliyah nodded. You want a drink or a snack? Some water or something? Vic followed her the few steps into her galley kitchen and caught her wrist. He tugged her toward him, and before Aaliyah knew how, she was standing pressed against him with his fingers tracing down the side of her face. Or something sounds about right. I've been wanting to do this all day. He lowered his head towards hers, his gaze on her lips. She closed her eyes and softened her mouth in anticipation. He paused. Aaliyah opened her eyes. His face was so close, she could barely focus on the way his lashes grazed his cheeks. May I kiss you? She melted officially and pressed into him, making it happen. She couldn't wait the time it would take for her to say yes. He hummed. You are better than I had imagined. Aaliyah gulped. And just how much have you imagined today? I have not been a good boy, if that's what you're asking. Aaliyah stared at him. The words coming from him didn't seem real. He stepped back and cleared his throat. I'll take a glass of water, I guess. Aaliyah smiled. She pulled a glass from the cupboard and filled it from the built-in filter on the fridge. Would you like to have dinner with me? she asked as she handed Vic the glass. His fingers grazed hers, and she felt it like an electric jolt through her entire body. Sure, where would you like to go? Vic asked. Aaliyah braced herself. I was thinking delivery. Whatever shall we do while we wait for our dinner to be delivered? The smile he gave her was wicked and made her toes curl. He knew exactly what she meant. Aaliyah was startled when the intercom buzzer sounded. That must be the pizza guy, Vic said. I'll be right back. He walked through her small apartment, leaving the front door ajar. It seemed like Vic was gone for a long time. Hers was the only unit in the basement, next to the building's laundry facilities. He had to walk the length of the building, twice, to reach the front security door. When he came back in through her front door, she couldn't help but smile. He made her feel like a giddy princess. He treated her like his queen. Vic set the pizza and the other boxes down in the kitchen and stalked back to her. Hungry? Aaliyah looked up at him. Not for pizza. Vic quirked his eyebrows at her. They were ridiculously pale, yet very expressive. The pizza and the chicken wings were cold by the time they snuggled together to watch a movie. Can you stay? Aaliyah asked. I can't think of a more important place to be right now. Vic sounded as tired as she felt. Aaliyah woke. She couldn't get the vision of that orc out of her head. It wasn't exactly a nightmare. It was the haunting of a bad memory. She rolled out of bed, careful to not disturb Vic. She stood and watched him sleep for a long moment. Even in sleep, he still had the harsh angles of a warrior. The bruise along his jaw had bloomed from a red mark to something dark and purple. It was stupid early. The sun was already up and doing as much streaming in through her windows as she would get all day. When a thought moved into her head and she couldn't get it out, she learned that she could force it out through her fingers. She propped up her phone and thumbed through until she found the photos she wanted. She still could barely believe those images were not expertly rendered digital art, but real. She began sketching shapes and forms on a cheap newsprint sketchpad. She drew and flipped the page to draw more. Her shapes were loosely formed, and probably only made sense to her if anyone else tried to figure out what she was doing. After some time, she knew exactly what she wanted. Pulling out the good paper, she traded out the traditional wood pencil for a mechanical one with a hard lead. Her marks were faint on the paper, as intended. The orc and the bear caught mid-action in battle was clear enough for her purposes. Once she had the major forms blocked in and refined, she reached for a brush and pulled over a small watercolor palette. Spinning in her chair, she grabbed a plastic cup, covered in layers of paint, and filled it with water from the kitchen sink. Morning, Vic mumbled. He stood at her art table, looking down at what she had been working on. This is amazing. I mean, I get a sense of really being there. Aaliyah laughed. You were. He picked up a small painting and stared at it. I mean, Aaliyah, I feel like I'm here. He held up the painting in his hand. I can feel the rush as their robes fly past me. I can see the movements. I get that a lot. I don't put in that much detail, but people seem to feel like I've taken them someplace. Vic shook his head. No, not that. I mean, these images are moving, making sounds, putting the memory of scent in my head. He looked her in the eyes. Aaliyah, you have magic. She shook her head, frantically. No, I have a talent that needs to pay better. It's not magic. I know magic. I'm part of a small group of men who hunt magic where it doesn't belong. Aaliyah, this is magic. Is that bad? The dancing nerves that Vic's praise had given her suddenly felt heavy, weighted down with dread. Not at all. But I can see why Maisie thinks you need to vend in an artist alley. You completely bring these characters to life. Yeah, Aaliyah sighed. I don't do the kinds of characters that people go to those cons for. I don't do superheroes. You don't need to. These fantasy martial arts shows have plenty of followers. Anything that's high fantasy has a following, it doesn't have to be fan art. Let me show you one before you decide it's not for you. Aaliyah placed the cup of water down and leaned against Vic. He smiled at her and returned his gaze to the art in his hands. I've never been to one. Are you sure? You are amazingly talented. The magic wouldn't be here if your work wasn't any good. Aaliyah pressed her face into his arm. He was still here, still saying wonderful things to her. Do I get to take you to your first con? He teased. Now that's a notable first. Don't be such a pig. Aaliyah playfully shoved his shoulder. That's Scotty. I'm a bear, remember? You still haven't told me how all of that happened. Magic.
Thank you for listening to this edited version of Berserker Boys, Bear. Copyright Lulu M, Sylvian and Moontan Press. To listen to the full audiobook version, please follow the link in this video's description. You will also find a link to other ebooks and audiobooks by Lulu M, Sylvian. Like and subscribe to this channel to get updates and notification for when additional romance audiobooks from Lulu M, Sylvian are posted. Please keep listening for a sneak peek into the next Berserker Boys story, Wolf. Cosplay takes on a whole new meaning when Viking gamers have the power to shape-shift. Yeardley hasn't been to a con in years. Not only is she looking forward to hanging out with her friends, but she is hoping the hottie Viking cosplayer Wolf will finally sit up and take notice. Unbeknownst to her, she's about to walk into battle, figuratively and literally. In an epic maneuver sure to go down in con history, Yeardley offers up a programmer smackdown. While still riding that adrenaline high, her skills are put to the test as she is thrown into another smackdown, this time of fantasy proportions. You don't choose the Berserker life. The Berserker life chooses you.
You ever just need time to process everything? He asked. It's like, for a minute I just need everything to stop moving so I can think straight again. He reached up and traced his fingers down the side of her face. You are so beautiful. I was thinking something similar, Yeardley said as she gazed down on him. We need to address the elephant in the room before proceeding. Wolf rolled and sat up facing her. Which elephant is that? There is an entire herd in here. Yeardley fell back onto her butt. Wolf climbed toward her. Simon? She asked. He rolled so he was laying back on the bed, but this time his head was in her lap. He reached up and stole the stick of licorice sticking out of her mouth. He took a bite before returning it to her mouth. Blame my parents for that, he said. And Wolf? That's a bit more complicated. Come here, he wrapped a hand around the back of her neck and tugged her down. She laughed as he raked his nails through her hair as it fell into his face. Uncomplicated. I guess it started when I started choosing Viking skins in games. So games came first? I'm a half-blind nerd boy named Simon who programs video games for fun. Yes, games came first. Okay, Simon, so you started playing Vikings. And that led to cosplay, and then really getting into it. Like really. I follow Odin and Thor. I know that Valhalla is out there for when I die with honor and glory. And that for some reason Odin chose me and my brethren, Vic and Scotty, for some glorious battle. Yeardley rested back on her hands. Yeah, but, she looked up thinking. Did your affinity with a name come before or after? Wolf twisted so he could see her. After? I saw you shapeshift today. And that might be from the gas leak, but I don't have the headache that usually follows exposure to natural gas. So either I got a whiff of someone's LSD, or I saw what I saw. And well, the LSD might be a more acceptable answer. Sorry, no LSD. My personality of the Berserker wolf was probably the second thing I established after the first time I chose a Viking skin. Okay, that's 2 big elephants out of the way, Yeardley said. I need a bath, you going to join me? Excuse me? If I've been exposed to gas or LSD or whatever, I would like to wash it off. I know I at least need to get that sprinkler system water off of me. There is a giant bathtub in there, she pointed in the direction of the bathroom, and there are at least 2 more elephants we need to address. Wolf was on his feet and striding into the bathroom. How hot do you like your bath? Lava or sauna? Not quite sauna, she said. I thought all women like their baths scalding hot. I don't want to be boiled. I want to be clean. Bubbles? Yeardley scrambled off the bed and stopped in the bathroom door. They have bubbles? Yes, bubbles.
This has been Berserker Boys 1 Bear by Lulu M. Sylvian. Copyright 2023.